Have you ever caught yourself in the shower, halfway through shampooing your hair, suddenly whispering, "No, that's not what I meant," to a person who is not even in the room yet? Or maybe you're walking to work and your brain has already held the meeting 3 times before the meeting actually happens. You've practiced your tone, edited your facial expression, prepared a comeback, then prepared a calmer, more mature comeback in case you don't want to sound like a raccoon in a blazer defending its life choices. And if that sounds familiar, you're not weird. You're not fake. You're not secretly auditioning for a one-person stage play called Conversations That May Never Happen. You're doing something a lot of minds do. And once you understand why, it becomes a lot less embarrassing and a lot more fascinating. Because from the outside, rehearsing conversations can look excessive. People might assume it means you're overdramatic, anxious, socially awkward, controlling, insecure, or just in your head too much. But psychology tells a more interesting story. The mind that rehearses conversations is often doing much more than trying to sound clever. It's predicting, protecting, regulating, preparing. It's trying to create safety in a world where words can wound, connect, reveal, repair, or completely derail your Tuesday. And the strange part is, this habit sits right at the intersection of anxiety, intelligence, memory, imagination, emotional sensitivity, and social survival. So if you've ever wondered, why do I do this? Why do I run imaginary dialogues like my brain is a tiny 24-hour writer's room? Let me show you what might actually be happening. Imagine someone sends you a message. "Hey, can we talk later?" That sentence is short, innocent maybe, technically harmless, but your nervous system hears it like dramatic movie trailer music. Suddenly your brain starts generating possibilities. Did I do something wrong? Are they upset? Is this about work? Is this about that joke I made 3 days ago? Should I be casual, serious, apologetic, confident? And before the actual conversation begins, your mind has built an entire rehearsal space. There's stage lighting. There are alternate endings. There are director's notes. Your brain is not relaxing. Your brain is preparing. This is one of the most important things to understand. Rehearsing conversations is often a form of prediction. And prediction is one of the brain's favorite jobs. Your brain is constantly trying to reduce uncertainty. Neuroscience increasingly suggests that the brain is not just reacting to the world as it arrives. It is forecasting it, trying to guess what happens next so it can keep you stable, efficient, and alive. In everyday life, that doesn't just mean predicting whether a ball is coming toward your face. It also means predicting whether a conversation will bring comfort, rejection, shame, conflict, admiration, disappointment, or relief. So when you rehearse, your mind is not being random. It's trying to simulate reality before reality gets a chance to surprise you. It's like packing emotional umbrellas because the social forecast looks unpredictable. For some people, this rehearsal is light and practical. You mentally prepare what to say to your boss when you ask for time off. You run through how to tell your friend you're upset without sounding accusatory. You practice a doctor's appointment in your head so you don't forget what you meant to say. That can actually be deeply useful. Research on mental simulation has shown that imagining future scenarios can help people perform better, feel more prepared, and regulate uncertainty. Athletes do it, speakers do it, musicians do it. Your brain apparently does not care whether the arena is a stadium or a text message. But for others, rehearsal becomes more than preparation. It becomes emotional armor. And this is where things get personal, because a lot of conversation rehearsers are not just planning words, they're planning for impact. They know what it feels like to be misunderstood. They know what it feels like to freeze, to say too much, to say too little, to think of the perfect sentence 6 hours late while staring at the ceiling like a haunted Victorian child. So the rehearsal becomes an attempt to avoid pain, not just social awkwardness, but the pain of exposure. The pain of saying something true and having it land badly. The pain of needing something. The pain of not being able to control how another person responds. That is why this habit shows up so often in anxious minds. Anxiety hates uncertainty. It hates the loose thread, the unread message, the unfinished sentence. It wants closure before the story has even happened. And rehearsing can feel like control. If I think through every angle, maybe I won't get blindsided. If I prepare every response, maybe I won't freeze. If I can just find the exact perfect wording, maybe I can prevent conflict, rejection, or embarrassment. It makes sense. It really does. The problem is that human conversations are not IKEA furniture. You cannot lay out all the parts, follow a diagram, and end up with one stable chair. People improvise. Emotions shift. Tone gets misread. Someone says, "That's not what I meant." And now your carefully scripted inner TED Talk is lying face down on the floor. Still, the urge to rehearse doesn't come from stupidity. Quite the opposite. Very often it comes from a highly active social brain. Some people are especially attuned to nuance. They notice pauses, facial expressions, shifts in wording, the emotional weather in a room. Psychologists sometimes talk about rejection sensitivity, social monitoring, or high interpersonal awareness. In plain language, some people read the room so intensely that they start reading rooms that haven't even happened yet. That can be exhausting, but it can also mean you're perceptive. In fact, people who rehearse conversations often have rich inner worlds. They're imaginative, verbal, reflective. Sometimes they're the same people who replay old conversations too, not because they love suffering, although at 2 a.m. it may seem like a hobby, but because the brain that simulates the future often also revisits the past. It wants to extract meaning. What did that look mean? Why did I say that? What should I have said? What will I say next time? This is part memory, part problem solving, part emotional processing. The same cognitive machinery that helps you imagine tomorrow also helps you edit yesterday. There's even a developmental angle here. If you grew up in an environment where other people's moods were unpredictable, where saying the wrong thing had consequences, where you had to monitor tone to stay safe, your brain may have learned that conversations are not casual. They are charged, important, potentially risky. So you became good at scanning, anticipating, adjusting. Maybe you learned to pre-think every sentence because spontaneity did not always feel safe. Maybe your childhood taught you that emotional weather could change fast, and you became a little barometer with a human face. When that happens, conversation rehearsal is not just a quirk, it's adaptation. A very intelligent adaptation, actually. The trouble is that strategies built for survival do not always know when the danger has changed. So the brain keeps acting like every difficult chat is a courtroom drama, when really it's just you telling your roommate that, yes, the pan does need to be washed before it becomes part of the apartment's architecture. There's also something deeper happening beneath all of this. Identity management. Every conversation contains a tiny question beneath the words. Who am I allowed to be right now? Do I get to be honest? Soft? Angry? Funny? Assertive? Disappointed? Needy? Forgiving? Many people rehearse because they are not only choosing what to say, they are negotiating which version of themselves can safely appear. That is why rehearsing often gets more intense in emotionally important relationships. The more something matters, the more the self feels on the line. And then there's perfectionism, that sneaky life coach from hell. Perfectionism convinces you there is a flawless sentence that will guarantee the perfect outcome. The ideal tone, the ideal timing, the ideal blend of vulnerability and composure, no trembling, no misunderstanding, no aftermath. But real conversations are alive. They are messy and human and gloriously inefficient. Perfectionism wants the conversation to be a chess move. Psychology reminds us it is more like jazz. There is structure, yes, but there is also response, rhythm, uncertainty, and the possibility of hitting a strange note before finding the melody again. One of the most compassionate ways to look at this habit is to realize that rehearsal often comes from caring. You care how your words affect people. You care about being understood. You care about not causing harm. You care about protecting yourself and preserving connection. That is not a character flaw. That is emotional investment. The danger is only when caring turns into chronic pre-living, or you spend so much time in hypothetical conversations that you stop trusting your ability to handle the real one. And here is something people don't say enough. The people who rehearse conversations are often the same people who feel deeply responsible for other people's emotions. They want to phrase things gently. They want to anticipate hurt. They want to avoid escalation. They are trying to land the plane without turbulence. Noble, admirable, slightly impossible. Because no matter how carefully you package a truth, you cannot fully control what it activates in another person. Their history enters the room too. Their fears, expectations, defenses, insecurities. Two nervous systems meet, and suddenly communication is less like mailing a letter and more like tossing feelings across a canyon and hoping the wind behaves. This is why rehearsal can become compulsive. It offers the illusion that responsibility equals control. If I think hard enough, I can manage the whole emotional ecosystem. But you can't. None of us can. At some point, healthy preparation has to make room for trust. Not trust that the conversation will go perfectly, but trust that you can survive imperfection. That's a huge shift. Because the opposite of compulsive rehearsal is not recklessness. It's self-trust. Self-trust says, I may not say this flawlessly, but I can repair if I need to. It says, I can tolerate a pause. I can tolerate being seen thinking. I can tolerate not having the perfect comeback on command, like I'm some emotionally literate action hero. It says, I do not need to pre-control every branch of this conversation to be safe in myself. That kind of trust usually doesn't appear overnight. It grows from experience, from learning that awkwardness is survivable, that conflict is not always catastrophe, that even when words come out clumsy, authenticity often carries more power than polish. And yes, sometimes rehearsal really is just your mind trying to help. Especially before meaningful conversations, a little internal practice can organize thoughts and reduce stress. Therapists even encourage people to rehearse difficult disclosures or boundary-setting statements. There is nothing wrong with preparing. The question is whether preparation leads you into the conversation or keeps you stuck outside it, pacing in the hallway of your own mind. You can usually feel the difference. Helpful rehearsal feels clarifying. It gives shape to what matters. It helps you remember your point. It steadies you. Unhelpful rehearsal feels like looping, tight, repetitive. You're not gaining clarity anymore. You're just rubbing the same thought like a worry stone until it gets hot. And that looping often has a strange, emotional logic. It feels productive, even when it isn't. Because the brain would rather do something than face uncertainty empty-handed. So it keeps generating drafts. More versions, more contingencies, more, what if they say this, then I'll say that. It becomes a conversation tree with 1,000 branches. And meanwhile, the real human being you're going to talk to is probably just reheating leftovers and wondering whether they forgot to reply to your text. There's a weird kind of comedy in that, isn't there? One person has constructed a full psychological battlefield simulation, complete with alternate timelines and courtroom evidence, and the other person is like, sorry, I was in the grocery store. But beneath the humor is something tender. Rehearsal reveals how badly human beings want connection without damage. We want to be known without being wounded. We want honesty without rupture. We want to say the true thing and still belong. That is such an ancient human wish. No wonder the mind practices for it. There's also something almost philosophical here. Rehearsing conversations reminds us that so much of life happens twice. Once in imagination, once in reality. We suffer before events occur. We negotiate futures that may never arrive. We write emotional scripts in the dark and then wonder why we feel tired. The mind is an incredible simulator, but it is not always a trustworthy prophet. It can confuse possibility with probability. It can make a maybe feel like a certainty. And it can make you forget that real life often arrives with more softness, more ambiguity, and sometimes more grace than the rehearsal predicted. So if you're someone who practices conversations in your head, maybe the goal is not to shame that habit out of existence. Maybe the goal is to understand it well enough that it stops running the whole show. To recognize when your brain is protecting you, when it's overprotecting you, and when it's asking for reassurance in the only language it knows, repetition. You are not broken because you think ahead. You are not weak because words matter to you. You are not ridiculous because you've had a full debate with someone in the car before seeing them in person. Honestly, half of being human is mentally preparing for emotionally weird little scenes in kitchens, parking lots, office corridors, and text threads. That's the species. That's the gig. But maybe the deeper invitation is this. What would happen if you let your preparation serve your honesty instead of replacing it? What if the point of the rehearsal wasn't to eliminate vulnerability, but to help you carry it with a little more steadiness? What if the real skill isn't saying everything perfectly, but staying connected to yourself while imperfect words leave your mouth? Because that's where real confidence lives. Not in having every line memorized, but in knowing you can still be yourself when the script falls apart. And maybe that's why this habit deserves more compassion than mockery. It is often the mark of a mind that cares, predicts, protects, and tries very hard to do relationships well. It just needs the occasional reminder that life is not won in the rehearsal room. It is lived in the actual conversation, in the stumbles, the pauses, the laugh that breaks the tension, the moment you abandon the perfect sentence and say the real thing instead. So the next time you catch yourself rehearsing an upcoming conversation for the 9th time, maybe don't immediately judge it. Just notice it. Smile a little. Your brain is trying to help. Maybe a bit dramatically. Maybe like an overcommitted intern with 17 tabs open. But still, it's trying. And then when the moment comes, let some of that rehearsal go. Leave room for surprise. Leave room for the other person to be more human than your fear predicted. Leave room for yourself to be more capable than your anxiety assumed. Because sometimes the most powerful sentence is not the perfect one you practiced. It's the honest one you finally trust yourself to say. And if this hit a little too close to home, that probably means you're not alone in it. I'd love to know whether you rehearse serious conversations, tiny, everyday ones, or those completely fictional arguments you somehow win brilliantly in the shower. And if you want more explorations like this, more ways of understanding the strange, beautiful things the mind does just to get through being human, stay close. There's a lot more to unpack.